Welcome to Church History Stories, where I explore fascinating and sometimes controversial topics from the history of the Church. Today, I'm diving into the life and legacy of Jan Hus and the mysterious Goose Prophecy. A theologian, reformer, and martyr, Hus's story is one of courage, conviction, and a prophetic declaration that would echo through the centuries. Jan Hus, born around 1372 in the Bohemian town of Husinec, literally meaning Goose Town, grew up with a modest upbringing that deeply shaped his convictions. His name, derived from his birthplace, earned him the affectionate moniker, the Goose, a symbol that would later carry significant prophetic weight. Hus enrolled at the University of Prague in 1390, originally pursuing a path into the priesthood for its comfort and prestige. However, his encounter with the writings of John Wycliffe, a reformer whose teachings challenged corruption in the Church, ignited a radical transformation in Hus's priorities. The era of Hus's early life was tumultuous, marked by the Great Schism, a crisis that saw rival popes vying for authority, and widespread corruption within the Church. Bohemia itself was struggling under the weight of clerical mismanagement, with many Czech priests poorly educated, morally compromised, and embroiled in practices like simony and concubinage. Reform efforts had already begun before Hus's time, inspired by figures like Konrad Waldhauser and Jan Milic, who sought to revive moral integrity within the clergy and preached in the vernacular to reconnect with the common people. This environment laid the foundation for Hus's later ministry. By 1396, Hus had earned his master's degree and joined the university's philosophy faculty. He gained a reputation not just as a scholar, but as a fiery preacher who addressed the moral decay of the Church head-on. In 1402, he was appointed preacher of Bethlehem Chapel in Prague, a hub for reformist activity. Hus's sermons, delivered in Czech rather than Latin, attracted massive crowds. He utilized innovative methods to communicate his message, commissioning murals in Bethlehem Chapel that contrasted the humility of Christ with the excesses of contemporary clergy. Hus's association with Wycliffe's teachings, particularly his emphasis on Scripture's supremacy and critique of clerical corruption, brought him into direct conflict with the papacy. In 1409, when the Archbishop of Prague attempted to silence Hus by banning his preaching, Hus stood firm. This defiance led to his excommunication and the placement of Prague under interdict, which forbade religious services in the city. The people's support for Hus, however, forced the Archbishop to flee, and Hus continued his reform efforts unabated. By 1412, Hus had reached a breaking point with the Church hierarchy, particularly over the sale of indulgences, which he denounced as a blatant exploitation of the faithful. King Wenceslas IV, initially supportive, turned against Hus when his opposition threatened royal revenues. This forced Hus into exile, during which he wrote extensively, producing works like The Six Errors, a critique of ecclesiastical abuses inscribed on the walls of Bethlehem Chapel to educate the laity. Hus's eventual trial at the Council of Constance in 1414 was fraught with political and theological tensions. Promised safe conduct by Emperor Sigismund, Hus hoped to defend his views, but instead found himself imprisoned. His refusal to recant his teachings, which he viewed as grounded in Scripture, sealed his fate. On July 6, 1415, Hus was executed, reportedly singing hymns as he was burned at the stake. The so-called Goose Prophecy, attributed to Hus at his death, has been a point of fascination. Though he likely never uttered the exact words, "Today you burn a goose, but in 100 years a swan will arise," the imagery resonated with later reformers like Martin Luther, who saw themselves as fulfilling Hus's legacy. This connection underscores the enduring impact of Hus's life and ideas on the Reformation and beyond. However, Martin Luther's alignment with Hus's theology came under fierce scrutiny during his debates. In 1519, Johann Eck accused Luther of siding with the condemned Bohemian heresy, a pointed reference to Hus and his followers. This accusation forced Luther to confront Hus's writings more deeply. Initially dismissive of Hus's legacy, Luther came to view him as a prophetic figure whose critiques of the Church prefigured the Reformation. At the Leipzig Disputation, Luther famously declared, "We are all Hussites without knowing it," a bold statement that tied the burgeoning Reformation to Hus's earlier struggle against ecclesiastical corruption. Luther's later writings further solidified his admiration for Hus, although he remained critical of certain aspects of Hus's theology, such as his Thomistic leanings. Nevertheless, Luther recognized Hus's martyrdom as emblematic of a justifying faith and drew inspiration from his defiance of papal authority. The connection between the two reformers not only validated Luther's critique of the Church, but also highlighted the continuity of reformist ideas spanning over a century. Thank you for joining me in this study. If you enjoyed today's topic, please like, share, and subscribe for more church history stories. Cheers.